is Denver Sports Tonight on this Tuesday night in the Mile High City. He's James Marilat. I'm Will Petersen. We will roll with you for the next hour. The day after the dust settles and the Broncos inform Russell Wilson they will release him. But did the dust settle all that much? You got Carl Mecklinburg, a Ring of Famer, absolutely ripping Russell Wilson. You've got Harry Douglas going on ESPN saying twice that Sean Payton hated Russell Wilson. And in the last 10 minutes, James, in the never-ending news cycle, you got Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk saying the Russell Wilson trade might have been the worst ever, especially if Deshaun Watson finally provides the Browns with a return on their investment. James, a day later, and it's still all anyone can talk about, Russell Wilson will be cut by the Denver Broncos. A lot of strong opinions out there today.
Yeah, boy, I don't even know where to begin. Look, first of all, the Deshaun Watson situation, I think it's an interesting comparison just from a football standpoint because he hasn't played any better than Russell Wilson did in Denver. He's just been injured so much that the Browns are like, well, might as well see what we've got here and let's see what he can do when he's healthy. Plus, his contract is fully guaranteed. They can't get out of any of it, so they might as well keep him around. They're not even looking at it and saying, well, $85 million in dead cap is better than paying a guy $245, so we might as well cut our losses. But I think that has the potential to go down as a worse trade. I mean, that team was better with Joe Flacco than they were with Deshaun Watson. They got to the playoffs with Joe Flacco. That's one that's interesting I hadn't thought of, right? Everybody talks about the Herschel Walker deal. But the fact of the matter is the Russell Wilson trade's in the conversation. And it's in the conversation because he went 11-19 over 2 years. He didn't play great, particularly in the first year, and the Broncos didn't give it a chance to turn itself around. Didn't see it out. They decided to cut bait and get out of it now. So now it's officially a disaster. It might have been a disaster if they kept him, Will, but now it's officially one and it's in the conversation.
Yeah, and it definitely is, again, dominating the news cycle from national headlines to local headlines to guys like Carl Mecklinburg, and I guess that's where we will start tonight. This kind of came out of left field. Carl, a Broncos Ring of Famer, played for him for 12 years, 83-94, 79 sacks, made 6 Pro Bowls, a 3-time first-team All-Pro. I understand if we have people listening in their teenage years or their 20s, they may not know who Mecklinburg is, but someone who's listening in their 40s, 50s, or 60s certainly knows who this guy is. He's one of the best defenders to ever wear a Broncos uniform, and he said today, quote, Russell Wilson isn't a leader. The foolishness that went on in his first year at Denver with a private coach, his own office at the facility, and family at training camp when other players didn't have those privileges proved his self-centeredness, complete with a graphic in all caps lock, a picture of Russ, and it says, got cut. That's all it says is this dude got cut, and he isn't a leader, and he was self-centered for all of the above reasons. James, these are strong words from, I don't know if legend is an appropriate word for Mecklinburg, but a very good player in Broncos history, kind of coming out of left field. What did you make out of all this afternoon?
Well, I do think, first of all, legend is probably the right term. I mean, he's a Ring of Famer, as you mentioned. One of the most versatile players in NFL history. He played all front 7 positions, so he played everywhere on the defensive line, all 4 linebacker positions, other than corner and safety. He did it for the Broncos defense and 3 defenses that went to the Super Bowl. So he was a great, great player. I think he is completely off base with all of this. So, you know, when you talk about the office, the family thing we'll get to. It was the office, and what was the other thing? His own personal coach.
The private coach, Jake Heaps, being allowed in the building when Nathaniel Hackett was there, which, of course,
sure. Sean
Payton famously put an end to at his intro presser last year.
Yeah, without a doubt. But if you go back and you watch the documentary, the Netflix documentary that Peyton Manning's company put together, Omaha Productions.
Quarterback. It was called Quarterback. Yep.
But Patrick Mahomes has his own coach. Now, he's not in the building because Andy Reid didn't allow it, but he's off working out with his own guy. He's not just working out with the Chiefs' strength guys. He's off doing passing drills and stuff like that with somebody that's not the quarterback's coach of the Chiefs. They all do it. Kirk Cousins does it. He has a masseuse and a chiropractor come to his house. Like, they all have to do that and go the extra mile partially because the collective bargaining agreement doesn't allow them in the building as much as they used to be and as much as they want to be. But all of them have their own personal coach. We'd be beating him up if he didn't have it. Why isn't he doing what Mahomes does? Why isn't he doing what Cousins does? Why is he like Paxton Lynch and Kyler Murray, and he'd rather play video games than work on his body and his game and his mechanics and all the rest of it? So I think the fact that he has that is ridiculous to get on him for it. Now, should he be in the building? No, But that's not on Russell Wilson. If my 15-year-old son takes the car for a joyride and I gave him the keys, is that on him or is that on me?
I think it was this notion, though. Let's go through these one by one. So we're on the coach right now. I think it was this sense of entitlement that, of course, Russ is going to be able to bring in his whole team into the building because he now runs the show at Dove Valley, not the head coach, not the GM, not ownership. Oh. Russell Wilson's king, and Russell Wilson's in charge. And by having Jake Heaps in the building, that was the message it sent to the rest of the team. I think that's what Karl Mecklenburg is getting at here.
Well, that's balderdash. So, first of all, we've never heard anybody on the team say that. Find me the quote from a teammate that said that. Now, there's the anonymous sources at the end of last year, some people that in the building and coaches and things like that said it. I didn't give that any credence at the time because if you're not going to put your name on it, I just don't want to hear it. But, look, everybody has those coaches, and Russell Wilson thought, hey, rather than having to leave Dove Valley and go to somewhere in Greenwood Village and work out with these guys, if they're all here, I'll be more efficient. It wasn't a bad thing. But it gets spun as a bad thing because everybody's anti-Russ at this point, and the media just puts out these narratives that the Broncos want to put out there to try and cover for the fact that they hired an incompetent coach who couldn't control what was going on in the situation, and to try and save face and blame the quarterback for a trade that they made that's a disaster.
But hold on, James.
That is positive. It's not a negative, but Karl just looks at it from a negative standpoint.
Then why did Jerry Rosburg tell Mike Kliss in July, quote, that all ended when I took over? After all that, I asked Russell Wilson to make a sacrifice, and he did it. At that point in time, things shifted in my view. So the Jer Bear, who in your eyes is the most competent coach they've had in a while, put an end to the office in the personal coaches when he took over on an interim basis. And we've all admitted the Broncos got a lot better in those two games when that stuff went out the window.
Right. So if Russell Wilson is this self-centered person that's all about himself and has all this guaranteed money, and Jerry Rosburg, who was going to have that job for 2 weeks and we all knew it, comes to him and tells him, no more, we're not going to do this. If he's what Karl Mecklenburg says he is, he would have said, hey, Jer Bear, stick it. I'm going to keep doing it.
He was 4-11. He was 4-11. He had egg on his face. He had no choice but to listen to Jerry Rosburg at that point.
Power struggle at last year after week 15, Russell Wilson's going to beat Jerry Rosburg in a power struggle? So the only time he was asked to not do it, he did what he was asked to do. That's the fact. That's the evidence we have. The rest of this nonsense that the media puts out there and that Karl puts out there is conjecture. Nobody knows any of that. I don't know that he did it because he was trying to be more efficient. What I'm saying is that possibility exists, and nobody puts that possibility out there. It's just, the only thing this could be, that why he had his own personal coach, even though every quarterback worth anything in the NFL has their own personal coach, is because he's a self-centered jerk and he only cares about himself. I think that's such an unfair narrative that you don't have. Does Karl have somebody who told him that? Or is he just throwing this out there?
I don't have the answer to that question, but I can also tell you spending time in your own office and not around your teammates is also a bad look. You should be one of the guys. If you go to an office and someone...
Do you know that happened? Or is he in his office once all the other guys have gone home? When all the other guys are at Cheesecake Factory, he's up in his office working. Do we know?
I mean... I don't have a 24/7 camera in the Broncos locker room, but I'm going to assume if they give him an office, he's using it, and he's not around the guys playing ping pong all the time like he should be, being a good teammate, getting to know these teammates.
We don't know. Is he using that office on his off day? Is he using that office at night? When is he using the office?
It's just a bad look to James. He has a house with 12 toilets. He can make an office at home if he needs an extra office.
He wants to be at the facility. The coaches are there burning the midnight oil. He wants to burn the midnight oil.
Well, he went 11-19, so the oil was not well spent.
My point is, those options for why he had the office and what he's doing are just as viable as the nasty, terrible picture that other people paint, and they don't have any evidence for that. They just say it. And it just becomes a fact because it gets regurgitated over and over and over again. Russell Wilson's a bad teammate, not playing ping pong with his teammates. He's up in his office demanding that everything's done his way. We have no evidence to suggest that. I put forth off the top of my head positive reasons why he could have that office and why it would make sense. And those have just as much validity as what is put out there that bashes Russell Wilson. So far, Karl Mecklenburg's 0 for 1. What's his next one?
Well, we kind of hit both there, the coach and the office. So you would call him 0 for 2 based on the...
0 for 2.
But like we'll get to the third one, which is the family. But it sounds like you're like genuinely upset with Karl for this tweet this afternoon. You really don't like this.
Karl, I don't, because Karl he's just become the symbol of false narratives or potentially false narratives that are out there that just get repeated over and over and over again, that are typically team spin, that the media takes and just runs with it and doesn't ask anything. They just say, thank you for the bullet points, and they just go repeat them. Perfect example of that is the nonsense that happened in 24 hours when Russ got benched. When everybody said it was because of the money, because that's exactly what it was for, and we all know it, and then the team, to try and CYA, turns it into, no, it was performance-based and blah, 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 and then they all just started repeating that like it was true. If you ever needed an example of how this works, that's it. And that happens, and then fans repeat it, and then other people repeat it, and it just turns into fact, and that's what bothers me. And Carl Mecklinburg, I'm not mad at Carl, I'm mad at the situation that he's now the symbol of how these narratives just take on a life of their own and become factual when they're not factual.
Yeah, but he's also,
doesn't mean they're wrong, but we don't know that they're a fact.
He's not a guy that flies off the handle all the time. It's not like we're talking about Carl Mecklinburg every week going, oh, another Carl tweet. I mean, this came out of left field, James. This is a guy who's still around the organization. He's a respected alumni. He's fairly active on social media, but it's usually pretty mundane. For him to have these strong of words that got my attention, and you ask me, do I have the evidence? No, I don't have the evidence, but I don't think Carl just made this up. I think he's got enough people that he still talks to and is close with in that organization that he felt the need to send this out today, that he didn't appreciate the way Russell Wilson handled himself in his 2 years in Denver, and as a very famous alumni of the organization, he wasn't happy about it.
All right, and he's entitled to his opinion, but I'm entitled to pick it apart.
Well, let's go to that third point then.
He doesn't have if he sourced this, and this is per sources, okay, but he didn't say that. He just threw this out there like it's his opinion and his take on what's going on, and I think his take is wrong.
His third point was that Russell Wilson, quote, had family at training camp when other players didn't have those privileges, proved his self-centeredness. I think I know where you're going to go on this one, and I actually tend to agree with you here, so I'll give you the floor.
Okay, so first of all, he had his family there. He had his wife there every day and his kids there every day. Now we're bashing somebody for that? That's problematic? Okay, so that's A. B, yeah, Sierra came in, and we walked in with her. We were joking about it yesterday. We walked in with her before practice, coming in a different entrance than everybody else. That's not because she's the quarterback's wife. That's because she's a superstar. You think Sierra walking around up on the hill, you know, past the cheerleaders are signing autographs and the place where you get your free bottle of water and the place where you can take a picture with the miles cut out, you don't think that's going to cause chaos? I mean, that's just not living in the real world.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I went to her his intro press conference, James, where Sierra rolled in with 2 bodyguards.
Yeah.
And when we walked in that day, one of her bodyguards was with her because, like you said, she is very, very famous, and very, very famous people have to have security with them. They have to have bodyguards with them, and it's not realistic for her to just go up on the hill like anyone else because she's going to spend her entire time taking pictures, signing autographs, and not doing what she's there to do, which is support Russell Wilson.
My guess is Taylor Swift arrives at Chiefs games in a different manner than all the other Chiefs' wives and girlfriends. Just a hunch.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that. Yes.
Right. And so then we were also at all those training camp practices last year. And Russell Wilson, so after practice, it's like, hey, who drew the short straw and who has to go sign autographs? And typically speaking, it's like 2 guys you've ever heard of and then 6 guys that you got to look at the roster and be like, oh, who's 68? Oh, okay. And it's a guy that won't be there after the second preseason game. Not knocking him, but that's just the reality, right? You're down there trying to get an autograph from somebody that hopefully will make the roster. Russell Wilson went over and signed autographs every single day for an hour. Every day. And we don't talk about that. We just talk about the fact that his wife got to have special privileges. A completely unfair and partial story that is getting put out there that I think is just, that's a smear job. That's a smear job. So the guy brings his family to practice every day. She's a superstar, so she has to be treated differently than everybody else, which is normal. And then he stays after practice and does something that no other star on that team does every single day, signing autographs for an hour, and we're spinning that as negative. Okay. I just have a different take than Carl does on how Russell Wilson conducted himself at training camp in year 1.
You can read about this at denversports.com. The tweet from Carl Mecklinburg has more than 100,000 views on the social media platform, 902 likes. It's certainly making the rounds. Let's keep it going.
My breaking point with these people just putting out this stuff. It's just, listen.
I can tell.
If you don't like the guy, fine. If you think he wasn't a great quarterback, fine. If you think he fumbled too much, I'm not going to argue that. But I think these personal attacks, and Will, this is mostly a personal attack. When you say somebody's not a good teammate and not a good leader, that's not about, hey, he doesn't go through his progressions right, and he's too quick to take off. And, I hear Schlereth and Evans every morning critiquing what Russ does and the way he scrambles, and I disagree. I think he ended up making a great play in Buffalo because that's how he plays, but whatever. Different, reasonable minds can disagree on that. That's not a personal attack. This feels like it's more going to his character, and I think that's unfair. The guy's leaving town. Just let him be.
All right, let's continue this conversation with everything that happened today because there was a lot I want to get to. Next up, we will talk about this. Harry Douglas on Get Up on ESPN this morning said not once but twice that he believes Sean Payton hated Russell Wilson, which are certainly very strong words. This is the same Harry Douglas who tried to injure Chris Harris Jr. Aqib Talib had the famous soundbite after that game in Tennessee in 2016. So for what it's worth, I just want to preface, yes, this is the same guy, but certainly, James, you're going to like this a lot better than Carl Mecklinburg. Harry Douglas saying this is all on Sean Payton. Doesn't deserve the treatment that he got. Again, Harry Douglas says twice he thinks Sean Payton hated him, berating him on the sidelines in Detroit, asking him to redo the injury clause after ending the losing streak against the Chiefs, and now being willing to eat $85 million, by far the largest dead cap in NFL history. I think Harry's language is a little strong at times, James, but I also think Harry made a lot of sense in that soundbite.
Yeah, I mean, his language is definitely strong, and if I'm going to be fair and rip Carl Mecklenburg for saying something where he's connecting dots, I think to some extent Harry Douglas is connecting dots here, right? Like, we haven't heard from anybody inside that building saying Sean Payton hated Russell Wilson. Like, I think it's a reasonable thing to gather, especially based on all the evidence that he put out there, but we don't 100% know it. I will say this.
But James, real quick, from the jump, he didn't like Russell Wilson texting Drew Brees too much. He told Seth Wickersham Russell Wilson needs to stop kissing babies. He told Russell Wilson, I don't want to hang out with you at the Super Bowl because Joe Montana's over there. Hate's a strong word, but it's abundantly fair to say he did not like Russell Wilson from the start.
Yeah, they don't see eye to eye. They're not buddies. I mean, they were also, though, hanging out at the Nuggets game and seemed pretty chummy, right? Sitting courtside. Like, they seemed friendly. It wasn't like they had their, backs turned to each other, not to be, body language guy, but they seemed fine. But I do think it's fair to say it was not a match that was made in heaven. And I think probably the best point Harry Douglas made there was, if you're willing to take on $85 million of dead cap just to get a guy out of the building, you don't like something about him.
Correct.
Right? Like, whether it's you think his game is that bad, okay, well, I don't, because I think he's going to go elsewhere and find success, but we're fixing to find out. Or you just think, you know what, I don't want to have this guy anywhere near the organization, and he's not a bad teammate. He was a good soldier the last 2 weeks of the year. Last year with Jarrett and this year with Sean Payton when he got benched for to make sure that they didn't have to pay him for next year, for 2025, which I get. That's fair. I don't have an issue with that. But yeah, they clearly didn't see eye to eye. They clearly didn't get along, and that's on Greg Penner. Greg Penner decided, hey, I'm going to hitch my wagon to Sean Payton and not Russell Wilson. So we'll see if it pays off. We'll see. They did it for 1 year because I think that was probably the deal that the Broncos had with them is, hey, we got to give this a shot. We can't move on yet. Do I think Sean Payton gave it 100% effort to make it work, or did it become a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy of, see, I can't make it work with this guy? I think it turned out to be more B than A.
Yeah, and the meltdown in Motown, that doesn't look like two guys that like each other.
Correct.
I mean,
but
you don't.
Phil Simms and Bill Parcells famously got into it on the sideline. Peyton Manning and Jeff Saturday. Like, football's an emotional game.
But that wasn't a two-way street, James. Russell Wilson just bit his tongue and took it.
Yeah,
that
that's
was
my
Sean
biggest issue
Payton.
with Russ.
That was Sean Payton freaking out on Russell Wilson because he didn't like him.
Maybe, but they had a disagreement, just like Mike Purcell and Russell did the year before in Carolina. I'd like to see my quarterback fire back. I want my quarterback to defend himself.
Especially when it was the refs' fault in that particular case. The Broncos scored 3 touchdowns, and then Sean yelled at Russ when the refs botched it 3 straight plays.
Yeah, so I don't think Sean Payton yelling at a player on the sideline, yelling at a quarterback on the sideline, I don't have an issue with that. I don't. Again, emotions run high, and that's not a unforgivable sin to me. I don't even think it's a sin. I think it's just how football goes. I think we're getting a little soft that that's such a big deal. Like, who cares? He yelled at him. So, but clearly these two guys didn't see eye to eye. And, man, it is going to be, it's going to be a coach trying to prove that it was the quarterback, and it's going to be a quarterback trying to prove it was the coach this coming year wherever Russ lands.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And honestly, we heard Harry Douglas say a lot of things that we've heard other ESPN personalities say, that they would have won a lot of games with Russell Wilson on the Steelers and the Falcons this year, that those were two pretty darn good teams, and Russell Wilson would have made it work, whereas in Denver, Sean Payton wasn't willing to adjust, and therefore the team was doomed from the start. I do find it curious that another person coming out and saying, yeah, you put Russell Wilson on the Steelers and Falcons, and they're a double-digit win team.
Well, and I also think it's interesting because he's a former player, the way he views the situation with the contract. Because, it was Dan Orlovsky and others when that story first broke that, really got on the Broncos and Sean Payton for that. That is something that, as a former player, it is pretty frowned upon and has gone over poorly with almost every former player that's in the media.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Hey, if you could help us grow our Denver Sports YouTube channel, we would really appreciate it. Give us a like, maybe leave a comment, share a video. Most importantly, hit that subscribe button. Never miss a video by liking and subscribing to Denver Sports on YouTube. All right, coming up next, there was some football news today across the league. This little thing called the franchise tag. The Broncos didn't use it. Was that a mistake? We'll dive in.